Hello and welcome to another episode of IT Pro TV. I'm your host Mike Roderick, and with me today is Mr. Sean Oriano. How you doing, Sean?
I'm doing pretty good. How you doing?
It's a great day to be here. We got our Kali Linux series continuing on, and in this episode, Sean, we're going to talk about IDSs, firewalls, and honeypots. A whole slew of things we need to talk about. So where do we start? I guess first thing we need to talk about is what the heck is a IDS and a firewall and a honeypot? And I know a lot of our viewers out there at this level already have a good idea, but I'm going to give you just a quick recap of what we're talking about when we talk about firewalls and honeypots and IDSs.
Yeah, it's always a good thing to do a little quick review when you're talking about stuff like this, because it can help you get an idea of how to potentially evade these guys if they are present. Well, what they are is just kind of look at it. We have IDSs, firewalls, and honeypots. So when we look at things like a firewall is a hardware software device that acts as a border between your world and the outside world, or a couple different zones that aren't trusted the same way as they would on the other side. So that's a firewall is going to fulfill that purpose, where it's going to say, okay, these aren't trusted the same. Well, I'm going to put a line right here in the sand to make sure stuff just can't walk from here over to here and vice versa. That's what they do. And of course, there's many different generations of firewalls. We don't really need to worry about that here too much, but there are different generations. Those different generations could require different forms of testing. So there is that. But then we also have some of our other things. We have IDSs, and really IPSs fit in that same category. IDSs are a detection mechanism, and they are something that works at the host or the network level, and they will pick up anything that deviates or just doesn't look like it should be there. And it's either going to happen with stuff flowing across the network, or it's going to be something that's done on a local system and say, hey, that's not supposed to be happening, or someone's misusing something there, and it's going to send it the red flag, and you will go ahead, hopefully, and either at least examine it or take some sort of action if necessary. Where an IPS will actually take action on its own. Once it detects, it will alert you, but then it will also take that action. And then the last one of that trio, the honeypots. A honeypot is a decoy mechanism. It's used specifically to attract traffic to it, or an attacker to it, with the intention that we attract them there. Once we attract them there, they spend their time and spin their wheels trying to get someplace where they're not going to get any place, and we can pick that up and use that as time to move more valuable resources out of the way, or perhaps track them back to wherever they came from, or even use it to get evidence that they were up to no good and prosecute them. That can happen as well.
Nice. So, and as a penetration tester, I've got to be aware of these things, because I've got to know, one, that they're there, be able to detect that they're there, and then possibly try to evade them so I can continue my test on and go past these guys. Firewalls, how do we even go around getting around a firewall? If a firewall is blocking ports, is there anything I can do to work my way around that?
Yeah, there's a couple things you can do to really kind of get an idea of what you're dealing with. One of them is a technique that, we didn't directly address it here in this course, but it was in the CEH, and we'll mention it here since we're talking about firewalls again, is you can use really any type of packet crafter, or you could use just plain old Nmap or port scanner to fire off a single packet towards the firewall, and with an ACK response on it. And depending on whether or not that ACK we get a reset response back or not, tells us whether or not there's a firewall in place filtering in any way, and that will tell you the presence of a stateful firewall, whether or not there's a response coming back from that. So that's one thing you can do, is to send that just one, and we'll just say one ping over to that. Like, sounds like Red October. One ping only. I wish I could do Sean Connery's accent right now. Just one ping only, lad. All right, you can do that. Now, the other one you could do to really kind of flesh out what's going on with the firewall, there is a tool in Kali called Firewalk, and it is a script. And what you will do with that is you do some configuration and tell it where the firewall is, and tell it how aggressive you want it to be, and a couple other things. And what it'll do is it will send a series of scans and packets at that firewall, and watch to see what the responses are and what it gets back, and how things react overall, and say, yeah, I know there's a firewall there already because I knew that coming into the whole thing. Now firewalking actually reverse engineered its whole rule set and said, yeah, here's how that thing's configured. I can see it right now. And so another really great tool in there.
Trying to determine what ports are being allowed or allowing traffic to go through, that kind of thing?
Exactly. By firing specially crafted packets and doing systematic sweeps of that firewall, it can tell by what it gets back and what it doesn't. It can start building the rule set based on that and say, okay, this is what the rule set looks like. And now once you have that rule set, you can say, yeah, I know precisely how to strike at that firewall, so it has little chance of stopping me.
Gotcha. And then when it comes to firewalls, we can use tools like firewalking, and that's in Kali Linux, right? Firewalk or firewalking.
Yes, we do have that. We do have that built right in and ready to go. You just have to give it, address of the firewall and some other things, and fine tune it, and it will give you what you need to have done.
Nice, nice. And then what about our? So we've also got to worry about intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems. And they can be host-based or they can be network-based. Do they give us any special tools to deal with those?
Yeah, we do have a special series of tools that deals with that, which I've just brought up the menu for. These IDS and IPS deals, what they have is you can see they have ways of fragmenting traffic, as well as a couple other tools that can do testing against an IDS IPS to see what the reaction is. And the fragmenting ones, hey, fairly straightforward, but they have ones like this one, like, F-test that actually sends, different, forms of packets against it and with different flags set on it to see how it responds. So we've got, that one. And then just to go through some of the, the other ones we have, or at least to mention them and within this, segment, we have one, the load balancing one. To kind of give you an idea, yeah, to see what the environment looks like, and then werewolf. I kind of like that. So werewolf, woof.
Right.
So all right. So what this is this one. You can see web application firewall. Well, that's our WAF woof. Okay, sorry. Still sounds cool. I'm going with mine. But not wearing my glasses. It's Friday and I don't care. So, guys might be coming here for a 3-day weekend. What's wrong with you? All this talk about freedom and I'm working.
All
right.
You got to pay for our freedom.
All right. So, but what this does is this will, literally, also do special checks against against these web application firewalls to see, what specifically that configuration looks like too. So it's got a lot of stuff to kind of really, figure out, what's going on and report that information back to you. So you kind of gotta like, this type of stuff because it tells you what you're dealing with, and they're pretty stealthy about it. The only reason they wouldn't be stealthy is if you decide to really be aggressive and turn all the options on and did all that crazy stuff. Then it's going to know specifically what you're trying to do.
Gotcha. All right, and then the other one that we were going to talk about was the honeypots. Now, again, a honeypot we talked about is a system that's set up that's a couple of different ways they can do it, right? But they set it up intentionally vulnerable or with some obvious vulnerabilities, and then hopefully the attacker attacks that instead of a system that has actual confidential information on it. We can detect that and maybe stop them or track what they're doing, trying to learn more about their attack method. What does Kali bring to us for working with honeypots? Like, give us the ability to set up honeypots, or more about trying to determine we're dealing with a honeypot? Because probably one of the things we want to do as a pen tester is same thing the bad guy. I don't want to waste all my time trying to work on this honeypot, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing with honeypots. As far as Kali is concerned, you really have the tools already to detect honeypots. You just haven't really employed them as that yet. To detect a honeypot, the most common methods you would have are doing targeted scans using something like Nmap. to use things like HPing3, which is a packet crafter, to fire specially designed packets at to see how those are responded to, with the goal that once you do these things, you can start reading the results, maybe do banner grabs against open ports, and start seeing what's being returned. And hopefully, if you're experienced enough, and maybe if you're just lucky enough to hit pay dirt, you will see that, yeah, it's identifying itself outright as a honeypot if you look in the right spot, or it might be that there's just not enough there. Sometimes you'll poke around and you'll find out that there's the look and feel of a real system there, but once you start digging behind it, nothing really exists. I mean, you could have something that looks like a mail server, and you start digging into those services and trying to enumerate things, and you find out that it's not returning any users at all. There's no mailboxes there because you're doing your whole thing where you're crawling through an open SMTP relay, and you're doing all your stuff, and you find out there's either no users or there's a very small number. Maybe there's 5-6 users on there. Makes sense that someone sent up an enterprise mail system for 5 or 6 users. It happens, but probably not.
Probably not that often.
So you would take that and kind of file it with other stuff that you find, and once you collected all that, pull them all out and look at it collectively and say, yeah, this is definitely a honeypot, because there's too many questions here and too many things that don't add up.
So it's not so much that we have a tool to detect a honeypot, but using our normal tools, and then our common sense or experience can kind of lead us to that conclusion. Here's an Exchange server, but it has 2 users on it. Or here's a web server, but there's no actual websites being hosted by it. Things like that. It's just the default configuration of IIS.
Yeah, that would indeed be what it is that there's something missing when you get into it. Now, that's not to say that that's just because it doesn't have anything in it. It's a honeypot. You can have systems that are fully populated with everything, and it's a honeypot, because they've gotten wise to this. So they have low interaction, high interaction honeypots. The high interaction ones emulate a whole network inside of them, and then they even have systems on it that have full accounts and mailboxes and everything else all set up. So when you start poking around in there, you're like, oh, everything's here. But still, if you poke around enough and maybe you start sniffing traffic and really examining things closer, you'll find out that there's the appearance of movement and life there, but there really isn't life there. Kind of like the government. So you'll find out that that's the way that's what it is. There's nothing really happening there, and it's just using your common sense when you're digging through that to say, yeah, my experience tells me that there's something just not here. And I also want to emphasize that some vendors and some best practices have been put out there saying, if you do a scan of something that you suspect is a honeypot, they've set it up so there's a specific port always open that's reserved for that honeypot, and they want you to do a banner. It's put up there so you can not only find it open, but you do a banner grab against it, and it'll identify itself right from the get-go as a honeypot. They're doing that just to say, hey, you're staring at one, and they're hoping that if you see that, it acts as a deterrent, saying, yeah, go someplace else. This person has deployed stuff and is ready for you.
All right. Okay. Sean, I was having trouble now. I know you did that earlier. Where was I didn't find Firewalk on here. Do we know where that one was buried at?
It is where they put it. It is in this is part of the problems with some of these things, is that they really get kind of buried down in there.
There are so many.
I had just seen it too myself.
All right, so Sean, with Firewalk and HPing3, we got a lot of tools we can use to discover firewalls, and IDSs and honeypots is another interesting one. As a penetration tester, these are things I've got to worry about when I'm doing a penetration test?
Yeah, you are going to have to worry about them, because they are always deployed, really. When you get down to it, well, maybe except for the case of honeypots, they're pretty much always in these larger environments. Firewalls, we're going to see all over the place. IDSs and IPSs, common devices in the medium to large-scale businesses, because of what they can do. They can give you that first indication that an attack is happening, instead of just a firewall that is stopping it right there at the outer edge or limiting traffic there. Now we have something that can say, Well, something got over the firewall and got into a certain point, and we can see it and detect it and respond to it before it goes any further. Now, with the last one, with the honeypot, it's not something that you can expect to see all the time because of their very nature. They have to be maintained a certain way. You have to be careful with them because they can be used as launching platforms for further strikes into your network. And not every company is just going to see a need for that. I mean, yeah, their main purpose is to be a decoy to attract someone away from your valuable assets, but companies may decide, instead of saying we're going to spend money on this asset, I'm going to spend more money on hardening these assets over here to make sure that that just never even becomes a reality where I have to decoy them away anyway. So, but they all are in play. They absolutely are all in play 100%. So definitely firewalls. More than likely you're going to see an IDS, if not IPS, then honeypot. It depends, but do expect to see them out there at least some of the time.
And as a penetration tester, we got to find them and then test them to see if we can get around them, because we've got to know if the bad guy is going to be able to get around those devices or evade those types of devices.
Yeah, it's either going to be in the case of something like firewalking to see if they can determine what the rule set looks like reliably and then be able to get through it. Once they're able to reliably determine what that rule set looks like, then it's just a matter of getting things moving the right way and crafting your attack the right way to get around it. In the case of an IDS or IPS, once you detect something like that, now you know that you have to be even more cautious about your attack to make sure you don't trigger it. And then the final one with a honeypot, as far as you're concerned, you want to be able to find out if you can get in. Is there, using your methods, is there a way for you to detect that you're even dealing with a honeypot? Now, because remember, while you maybe have been given privy to the fact that you do have a honeypot there and it's a decoy, the attacker's not going to have that same level of knowledge. They're going to say there's a system there, and there's a system there, and a system there, and they're all the same on the same footing. It's like, no, these two are actual production systems. This one's a honeypot, and even though they all look the same, and that one is indeed different, this one won't take you anywhere. This one is a padded cell. That one's going to get you in there, and you're going to beat your head against the wall trying to get out. You're stuck. And so we want to make sure that the attacker can't pick that up, that's safe and sound enough that it will keep them occupied, and there's no real obvious way for them to pick up that is what that thing's purpose is.
No, so I didn't even think about that, because we're trying to figure out if we can detect if it's a honeypot, because we need to see how easy it is to figure out that it's a honeypot. If it's too easy, then it's not going to do its job as a honeypot. It's not going to attract the bad guys for very long. They're going to be moving off to the other servers and now hitting my actual resources.
Yeah, you want to be able to think in those terms that it may not be a case of can I break it or get around it. Maybe a case of can you in this case can you even detect it? Someone's if you dig a big hole in the ground, expect someone to fall into it. Someone is going to eventually fall into it. But if you're trying to trap someone, they're going, I'll walk around it. I'm not going to fall into that. What do you think? What are you thinking? So
Let's put some M&Ms in there.
Yeah, if you put some M&Ms or something like that. Then
or in your case, Reese's peanut butter cup.
Yeah,
right?
maybe something like that. And so it's just being smart. Being smart about these things is that think about what that device is used for.
Right. All right, well, Sean, a lot of great information there about if I can even say it, firewalls and honeypots and intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention systems. These are things that we're going to run into as a penetration tester, so we have to be aware that they're out there, have to be able to detect that they're there, and in some cases try to evade them or get around them or get through them so we can see what those bad guys can do to the network. So anything else we want to throw in before we wrap up this episode?
Well, do remember, you are going to see devices like this in environments you test. It's very easy to go through something like the CEH or play with any of the tools that we've talked about during the week and just assume that you can just readily deploy those and throw caution in the wind and go in and do whatever. No, if you do that, you're going to get caught. Yep. You will get caught. So what you need to do is, first of all, learn how to use the tools and learn how to use them effectively, become a master at that. And then once you've done that, learn how you can be more conservative and what techniques will lower your chance of being detected versus which ones will increase your chance of being detected, because that you don't necessarily want to be detected. So you need to be thinking ahead, but first plan what they are, or figure out what the tools do, and how they work. Once you got how they work, then start saying, okay, well, I do know there's detected devices on here, and by the way, you can get IDSs and IPSs and honeypots and firewalls. You can get all of those for free. Online. They have Linux distros that do that specifically. In some cases, they have stuff like Snort that takes care of the IDS function. So you can build these things from scratch and then test actively against those. And once you have that information, you can start planning out your attack to be much, much better and much, much more effective than it would have been otherwise. So those are the types of things you should be doing. Go ahead and practice, and and without concerning yourself that those devices are there. Then once you get better, start figuring out those devices will be there. How can I get around them without and tiptoe and crawl around without them picking me up?
Very good. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed watching this show. For now, signing off for IT Pro TV, I'm Mike Roderick.
And I'm Sean Ariano.
And we'll see you next time.